And today, the ds-incubator is a response to a retrospective that we did internally here at 2 Degrees. I realized that a lot of the feedback that you gave could be implemented, actually, could be kind of help structure the meetups a little more. So I'm now going to follow him more closely. A checklist that I developed a while ago and was a little outdated. That checklist helps design the meetup, but also run it. So first, I wanted to acknowledge that the audience of today is particularly those who participated in the retrospective. It is a response to that retrospective, acknowledging the effort that it takes to open the dialogue and say what you think about the ds-incubator. And also, I think that it could be potentially useful for those who are trying to do similar projects in their own organization, people outside 2 Degrees who may use this idea of a retrospective to improve projects of their own. So the importance of this meetup in particular is, again, to acknowledge that it is not easy to give feedback, and it feels frustrating when you get feedback and then you feel that nothing happens. And there is a lot happening behind the scenes, and a lot of the decisions that are made to run this series of meetups may not be expressed all the time. So it's a good opportunity to say, what are all the things that I at least consider when making decisions, and also to be open about how these decisions are made. In different projects, the decisions are made in different ways. For example, the practices project that Monica leads is using consensus, because the topic is so important that it deserves everyone to buy in. But in the ds-incubator, the system for making decisions is different. I am here consulting you, getting your feedback, and finally just making a decision. This is an appropriate system for this kind of decisions, where it's not mission critical that everyone agrees in absolutely everything. Consulting is a common approach and relatively cheap in terms of how much I'm asking you to participate in the feedback that you give. What I plan to cover is this little introduction that I'm already giving, also to explain what are the decisions that follow your feedback, also try to explain what are the trade-offs that I consider, coming up with some conclusions, and then opening the floor for discussion, and also to kind of nudge you to propose topics for series of meetups that will be coming up the rest of this year. I pointed here to a resource that is the document that is at this link. You don't need to go there now, just know that the resource is linked at the issue associated to this meetup, and you can read my thoughts there. And I plan to also follow up with a blog post in the Data Science at 2 Degrees blog. Before I move on, do we have any question now or comment before I get into the direct response? No? Very good. Okay. I will ask you for, as we are becoming used to, I'm going to ask for a round of voices at the end, and you're very welcome to say, I pass. But if you have something to say, that will give the structure that we need to make sure that everyone has at least the opportunity. You don't have to say anything, but at least you will have the time. I think the first thing I kind of covered, how the decisions are made. In the retrospective, we covered the typical 3 questions: what went well, what didn't go so well, and what can we do to improve. And then I also asked for a question about what you think is the impact of the ds-incubator in your kind of everyday life. More than anything, I'm interested in how to improve. So the other 2 questions are basically a structure to prompt ideas about how to make the ds-incubator better. So the decisions that I made are, first, to nominate a timekeeper every meetup. Today, for example, is Jaco. Also use a very useful tool for making sure that everyone has the opportunity to share their ideas at the very end of every meetup, this idea of a round of voices. And again, everyone is welcome to pass that opportunity, but it's good for them to have it. Also, the idea that standalone meetups are fine, and sometimes the topic we want to cover is short enough that it's okay to just have one meetup focus on that. But also, I noticed that a series of meetups is very useful. So some people have been talking about a syllabus, and that also suggests that, okay, there is more than one meetup, more than one topic that we cover. So the benefits of a series of meetups that I see are two. From the perspective of those who attend the meetups, you have the opportunity to hear about more complex topics that are not a good fit for just one meetup. And for me, as someone who leads the project, either by developing the material or by helping someone else develop the material, I think it's very useful because when you have a structure that gives you some insight about what's going to happen in the future, is much easier to prepare meetups. So the time to prepare a meetup is much faster when it's part of a series that you can already have a very good idea of what to teach. Dramatically drops the time that is required to prepare a meetup. Also, I decided to deprecate the labels must have and nice to have, because I now think that the project practices that Monica and with my help is leading, I think is a much better alternative to know what we should do and what are kind of nice things to do. Finally, 3 more things. Also, I think that the focus is going to be every time more to design the meetups with this idea of a demo more than interactive workshops. I'm going to explain trade-offs there in a moment. Also, I would like to articulate every time more clearly who is the audience and how it's relevant, the content that we teach to the people at 2 degrees, hopefully with a good example. Sometimes we're not going to be showing that particular example for 2 degrees because sometimes it's too complex, but actually I'll address that in the scopes probably section. And finally, to articulate how people can learn more about the topic, like for example, in the meetup issue, there is the resources section that points to the doc that I was showing just now. So that's one way in which you can learn more. If you meet something in this meeting, you can go there. And also I linked to a summary of a book called Crucial Conversations that I'm using, for example, to understand why I should be using consulting as opposed to, say, voting or command or consensus for this particular decision. And also more broadly for the idea of how to get dialogue going and ideas flowing through, for example, the round of voices that we're going to run at the end. So trade-offs. In terms of the schedule, I decided to not change the day or time of the meetup. And that is even when I acknowledge that having 2 meetups back-to-back is a bad idea. So we have the ds-incubator, and then following that, we have the Data Herald. The lighter weight approach to solving that problem of timing for now is the timekeeper. Let's see how that goes. My fear is that if I change the time and day, some people are very fond of attending, may not be able to attend, so I don't want to steer the pot too much. In terms of demos versus interactive tutorials, I want to acknowledge that all the research that I've read about how to teach and learn effectively points towards that doing helps more than hearing or seeing someone else how to do something. However, the trade-off there is that that is takes time, and also makes because it costs more time. It is also less the number of contents that we can expose people to in the ds-incubator. And I acknowledge that because the people do not participate every time in deciding which topic is going to be covered, I think that sometimes they may be sitting here in a workshop in a meetup that is not very relevant to them. So I think that sometimes being just exposed to many topics as opposed to just a few very deeply. So the first approach I think is probably where the ds-incubator fits more. So I do sacrifice. I know that I do sacrifice the potential for learning more deeply, in the interest of at least hearing about more things, and then it is totally the responsibility of the listener to follow up and learn more. And each meetup will be pointing to resources to do that on your own. And of course, we have the coding help desk, which is an opportunity to, for example, get one-to-one help in actually learning more. In terms of interactive workshops, I think that's a great idea that was proposed in the retrospective. The idea of, instead of having half-hour meetup, having something that is longer and more focused. That's a great idea, and we used that idea, I think, last year to talk about tidy data science using tidyverse tools. The problem with that is that, the trade-off there is that it costs a lot of time to prepare, and because it takes so much time, it is also slower the ability that I have to respond to needs that I see in everyday life at 2 degrees. So the meetups at the 2 degrees of the ds-incubator very often just are an immediate response to some problem or challenge that I see in how we work. So that flexibility is something that I would like to keep. So I see now a workshop more as a complement as opposed to a replacement for the ds-incubator. So I think the two things together would be great. Then if and when we're going to have a workshop is yet not decided, but at some point we had a conversation about doing actually in-person workshop. Give me a second, I think I need to let someone enter the room. There you go. Finally, the other trade-off is that of relevance. I just need to acknowledge that it's extremely hard to develop an example that is simple enough so that I can show the content. I can teach content without the content getting buried and confused by the complexity of a real life example. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out, and if you have good ideas, I'm happy to hear. But I guess that the one response that I can have to that is that of making at least an effort to articulate explicitly how the concepts may relate to an everyday life. So maybe show a simple example, but then make at least the mental effort to explain how that translates to your experience at work. And also I want to acknowledge that the meetups are generally have as an audience not just 2 degrees, but also people beyond 2 degrees. I published it in a public YouTube channel because that helps other people outside 2 degrees. So our role in our community is there. So a lot of what we learn is thanks to people that, like us now, are donating their learnings to the community. So I think it's important to keep feeding that virtuous cycle. So my conclusions, and soon we are going to get into the discussion, are basically three. A meta conclusion is that the conclusion is that this retrospective are really helpful in shaping the ds-incubator for the year at least. In terms of the structure, I noticed that a lot of your feedback could be easily incorporated into a checklist, something that says, hey, make sure that you have nominated a timekeeper. Hey, make sure that you have articulated who is the audience. Make sure that you have related the content to the everyday life of people. So structure. I think that one of the big takeaway for me is that I could structure the meetups in a way that is a bit more formal. And that should also help me and others who want to contribute to the ds-incubator because the structure helps guide what to do. Okay, so what should I teach? What should I say first? What should I say second? And finally, my conclusion about relevance. It was very interesting to me to read that it is not obvious how the ds-incubator impacts our day-to-day life. For many people it's not. For some people it's kind of clearish, but it's not obvious. So that suggests that the role of the ds-incubator is not that of being the only thing that helps people share best practices or practice best practices, but instead it is just one piece of a number of efforts that we are doing at 2 degrees, and the effect that we see is compound. And I think, I do see, looking back 1 year, I see that what we have now, the way we do things now is incredibly better. But of course, I'm not giving the credit to the ds-incubator only. What I'm saying is that I think that having multiple efforts working in parallel, each doing their own little contribution, I think that's the main reason why we see, that the way we work now is dramatically different from what it was like 1 year or 1.5 years ago. So with that, I have 2 things left. One is the round of voices that likely arrives a little earlier, and 2 is to suggest topics for meetups. I was thinking of voting today, but I think I won't do that because I fear that some people that would like to vote is not here. So instead, I would ask you to just propose topics, and then I will formalize a poll or a voting framework on Slack so that everyone, including those who didn't attend today, have the opportunity to share their opinions. So with that, let's see if I can open a round of voices. So the first loop, I would like to just hear about 1 minute of your ideas, the ideas that come to your mind from this meetup. And the second round is going to be about proposing topics. So first round, I have here Jakob first in my screen. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Claire? CJ? Great. Katarina? Good, thank you. Andy, I'm not sure if you were able to hear everything, but I know maybe you have a feel for what this is, and you can share what you think about it. Great. Alex? Thanks. And now this final round of voice, and then if you have any time left, we can just chat, freely. This last round of voice, I would like to hear if you have any topics from the top of your head that you would like to. Particularly, I'm interested in hearing topics now that could make up like a series as opposed to just one meetup. If you have one meetup in mind, totally propose it to me, contact me on Slack, and we can make it happen. In this round, I would like to see if there is any big theme. Like, for example, I thought about the idea of interactivity from zero to hero. I thought about the idea of using targets for data pipelines. I thought the idea of teaching package development in an extensive way. So those things I would take 2 or 3 or more meetups. Jakob? Thank you. That's a challenging one. Claire? Thank you. CJ? Thanks, Jakob, for the reminder. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Basically, what have you? I mean, there's a lot of good things in there that are not advertised enough. They don't have a space to be demonstrated and maybe underused. Katarina? So you say more about Git and GitHub? Is that would be your kind of vote? Right, but in terms of themes, you could vote for more about Git or GitHub as opposed to say, learning about targets or learning about Shiny or I don't know. In terms of big themes, you're proposing to continue with a series about Git and GitHub. Thanks. Andy? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's the idea of catching up and to onboarding as well, new people, onboard new folks. Thanks. I'll think about that. I think I'll come back to you directly. Alex, by the way, if Klaus has just joined, we are proposing topics that are long enough for 2, 3, or more meetups as ideas for later DS incubators. Alex? Thank you. Klaus, your opportunity to say if there is any particular topic that you would like us to cover in the DS incubator. You can also pass. Say again, sorry? Disappear. Okay, good. All right, that brings us to the end with 30 seconds to spare. So I thank you very much for being here. The lessons I learned from your feedback will be converted into a blog post, and your topics will be converted into a poll that I will ask you to vote. Thanks very much.